Hello, this is Mr. McKay, and I'd like to talk to you for a minute about gross domestic product, or GDP. In lesson 6, you are asked to calculate GDP, and I'd like to take a couple of minutes talking about what that measurement is and how those pieces fit together. Gross domestic product is made up of the production of the entire economy, and when we measure that, we break that up into 4 sectors. The first ones of those sectors would be consumer spending, or in your formula, we use a C to represent consumer spending. In most economies, consumer spending accounts for more than half of all of GDP. You also have investment spending. Investment spending in our model here represents spending by businesses on capital and equipment, and that is represented by the letter I in our formula. We also have government spending, and most modern governments spend quite a bit, and that is a big portion of most countries' GDP. That is represented by the letter G. We also have exports. We need to measure the things that are made in our country but may be sold somewhere else, and that is represented by the letter X. We also have to account for imports, goods that come into the country. Because only goods made domestically count in GDP, we have to eliminate the imports that are counted there. When you buy an import, it's going to show up in national income accounting figures, but we don't want to count it in GDP. So we're going to take that out as it's imported. So that's why we subtract imports. So we add consumer spending, investment spending, government spending, exports, and then you subtract imports. With a lot of countries, that's going to actually decrease the number because imports are usually greater than exports in developed countries. All those combined will give us the figure of GDP. In the United States, we have a GDP of roughly $17 trillion for the last fiscal year. That was comprised of about $12 trillion of consumer spending. Roughly 3/4 of all spending was consumer spending. Investment spending was about $3 trillion. The government spent an additional $3 trillion. We had exports somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 trillion, while we imported $3 trillion. Our net exports was a negative $1 trillion, for a grand total of $17 trillion. To give you a comparison, if you're taking this class in Brazil, last year's fiscal year had a GDP of about $2.2 trillion, or roughly an eighth of the United States GDP. 1.3 trillion in consumer spending, about a little less than $500 billion in investment spending, about $500 billion in government spending, about $250 billion in both exports and imports, roughly balanced for a total of 2.2 trillion. If you're looking at China, by comparison, a nation that has had a large increase in GDP over the last couple of decades, they're close to the United States at $13.3 trillion. You might notice with theirs that consumer spending proportionally is much lower. In China, they don't spend as much on consumer goods, they invest more. And their exports are greater than their imports, and that's probably not a surprise to you because you can't go far without finding the label Made in China on something you own. That would be my guess. I hope this has been helpful. As you calculate that GDP on the activity in Lesson 6, remember that your imports are very likely to be larger than your exports, so don't be alarmed when there's a negative number and you see that GDP fall in your final result. I hope that's helpful. Until next time.